Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of AI in the Enterprise. I'm really excited to spend some time with Ross Freedman. I'll introduce you to him in 1 second on a really important topic, which is everything about digital experience and the new experience economy. And Ross, I think, is really well suited to discuss that topic at hand. He's CEO of RightPoint. He has spent a career in thinking, practicing, implementing, and advising some of the largest corporations in the world on the aspect of digital experience and the experience economy. And he's joining us from Chicago, Illinois today. Ross, welcome.
Sanjay, thanks for having me.
You know, Ross, I always enjoy doing this. You and I have worked professionally together. I've done this with other guests on the show, and I find I learned some really interesting things. I want to ask you the same question I've asked a few other people, which is, we work together, and I know you professionally, I think, rather well. But people that don't work with you, your friends outside of work, how would they describe you?
I think people describe me as eternally optimistic. I'm always looking at the glass half full. Even when things are really tough, especially right now, I'm always looking at the bright side, the silver lining, and how are things going to get better and where are we headed? How is this going to make us stronger? So I would say eternally optimistic is how people would describe me.
That's a great definition. By the way, it coincides with what I hear from many entrepreneurs I interact with, and I know you've had good experience and a long experience in that area. So the DNA and the profile goes with what you do. So thank you again for joining us. I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to get into the meat of the matter right away. Look, there's all of this talk around experience and experience being core to digital transformation. What exactly is that?
I always believe the definition of an experience from my perspective at the most basic and atomic level is the interaction of a human senses with a person, place, thing, or event.
Okay, whoa. So talk to me a little bit more about that. The intersection. So walk me through that again.
You know, the more senses that are engaged by a human, the more experience the human has. So whether you're thinking about interacting with a physical event or a physical product or a digital screen, everything is an experience in and of itself.
Interesting. And so you're talking about, I mean, in many ways, we think about the physical world as a world where we actually have a lot of experiences, and you're trying to recreate the multitude of all of that in the context of a digital world. Is that sort of where you're headed with this?
Yeah, I mean, experience in the context of what I do and what RightPoint does is really redesigning and transforming experiences for a business around a human being. It's really that simple.
Awesome. And why is that so important now? I mean, this feels like it's just shot up in its importance. Why is that?
Well, I mean, every interaction a human has is a brand moment, and those could be positive, they could be negative, and they could be neutral. And now more than ever, people are disconnected, people are remote, people are working in physically distant places. It's important for these digital experiences to be productive and to contribute to the positive brand moments an overall brand needs to have.
So what's interesting in that is I've been speaking with many of the folks that are joining us in our audience today, and CIOs, chief technology officers, many CXOs around the globe. And it feels like particularly what's happening today in light of the work from home and all of the stuff that we're going through around the pandemic is entire value chains need to very quickly adapt and change. Many of us will start interacting and transacting business in ways that are new and different. And surely experience is a large role to play. Can you bring that to light a little bit with some examples and ideas that come through?
Yeah, I mean, we're working with a number of different clients today in a variety of different industries. And every industry, as we know, is being impacted. So the first thing I think about is employee experience. How are we thinking about redesigning the employee experience now that people are working from home? And whether you're a professional services firm, a hospital, or an oil and gas company, every company has a new normal. And every company is thinking about how to use technologies like Microsoft Teams and Zoom, but not just as point solutions, but as a connected experience for an entire experience for the employee.
Okay, so that's actually, I think you're trying to lay out an interesting framework. So as I think about experience, you're starting with employee experience, which is inside the corporation. What would be next on the ladder? What, you know, if I wanted to address experience as a CEO, what are the steps on the ladder, employee experience being one?
I always like to start on the inside and work my way out. So you think about like employee experience being the core or the nucleus of every company. We got to get that right first. Employees are brand ambassadors for our clients. And so from that perspective, the next layer out, I would say, is service experience. What is the service design? How do we think about employees and customers working together and getting inbound requests and servicing those requests quickly and responsibly? And from there, we think about commerce. We think about how we interacting, how do we transacting online. And so I would say that's a third outer ring around the experience.
That's a great way to think about it, in three different rings, if you will. Start on the inside, expand to include services, and think about commerce. I'm just going back to where you started on the inside. I heard something yesterday. We all use the word work from home, and we've kind of come to adapt and think about that in the way we're doing this video broadcast as an example. I think a better word for that might be living at work, because we've actually turned our homes into our workplace now. So we're actually living at work as opposed to working from home. And so I think about the word of employee experience. I mean, it takes special meaning in this time and age. And as we shift our ways of working to actually get large distributed teams to be effective in distanced environments, that's going to be a large call for most corporations. How do you think about that? What are places to get started? What's good look like in that scenario?
One of the things that's become a topic is that we have found that in some cases we're more productive now than we were 3 months ago, because everyone's just working all day long. So they're working as part of their life, and work is taking over their life. And so what we're fearful of is that, this is the new normal and people are going to get burnt out. So I think we have to think about the experience being a tempered one right now. And while there's nothing else to do other than work from home, we need to be thinking about making sure people don't get burnt out, and that when we do come back to normal, what does that new normal look like? And how do we think about a balanced approach to being able to work from home and also being able to work distantly as well?
I think on your second part of the framework, thinking about service design, something comes to mind. We went out and picked up some dinner 2 nights ago from town. And it used to be that we had our favorite restaurants, and every family does. There you kind of go to restaurants. And what I realized in the process is that our go-to restaurants have changed because of the change in times. And restaurants now that actually have a great ordering mechanism and predictability in when the order is going to be ready, and the service associated with bringing it out and put it in the trunk of your car, so you're not waiting at the curbside for longer than you were scheduled to. Like, a lot of that now becomes part of the experience of eating out or of eating at restaurants, which is very different from where we were 3 months ago. And it feels like businesses are able to sort of change their operating value chain to match the experience that needed at the time, are actually now rising to the top. And hence the reference that I made about my go-to restaurants have changed. As you work with large corporations, you work with companies, businesses across the globe, what is your advice on changing, adapting, tuning your service offering?
Well, I think that the bar has been raised. The example you gave with restaurants, we now can't go back to pick up and carry out without people delivering it right to our car, even after COVID-19 comes and goes. So I think that what's happening is that it's forced the bar to be raised, and the companies who weren't focused on experience are now focused on experience even more. And the companies that are focused on experience are going to be exponentially focused on it. And so I think it's a reminder that the bar continues to go up. Experience is the last great competitive advantage in our world. And COVID-19 only forced us to understand that faster than I think we normally would have.
That's amazing. I love that phrase, that it's the last competitive advantage. And one of the things, I think someone else remarked this, that 2 years of digital transformation just got done in the last 30 days because of COVID. And so we're starting to see so much in there. I want to shift to a third part of the framework, which is the experience as it relates to transacting business. And it struck me in a recent conversation with a fellow CIO of a consumer goods company, that they had to switch overnight from their sales channels of 50-50, 50 retail, 50 online commerce, to 0-100. In other words, 0 selling at stores and 100% selling online. And for them, the challenge became not necessarily how do you operate the front end website to actually get people in, but the entire value chain around order management, delivery, predicting demand, supply chain. And so I know you said transacting business, but it's more than just the front office. It's the entire value chain, isn't it? And give us some perspectives on how to think about that holistically.
I think that the word is pivot that I think about. Companies need to pivot hard right now, and the ones that don't are going to become obsolete very, very quickly. And we're working with companies whose entire business is physical, and they're now having to pivot to digital and remote. Example was a large health club chain over the course of the last couple of weeks, they're realizing that they need to have a digital experience that allows them, their trainers, to stay connected with their clients. And if they don't do that, they're gonna lose business. And so they're obviously getting hurt very hard because all these gyms are closed. But while those gyms are closed, they want to maintain that connection. So helping them create that engagement through a digital experience is super important. And what's going to happen is that when people can start going back to gyms, there are going to be, quick shutdowns when there's a flare up with another, pandemic, or there'll be an influenza season where things, start to shut down again. Next time they're going to be prepared because they're going to pair their physical presence and experience with a digital presence and an optionality there.
Amazing thoughts, and I appreciate you sharing those with us. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to go into one last topic, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions in that area, Ross. It sounds like many of us, you and I included, have worked aggressively to respond, to react, to deal with the turning events and the situation at hand. And many of us have done well. Many of us have learned lessons through the process, but it's been just all good. I want to move away from that a little bit. I want to talk about the future, and I want to think about where we're going to head out, coming out of this, growing out of the pandemic, and really think about the world at large. Talk to us about the role experience will play beyond what we're seeing right now in the long-term trajectory of digital transformation.
I think there's no question that if experience was important 3 months ago, it's 10x more important 3 months from now. And again, it's a wake-up call for companies. The companies that were caught unprepared are now going to be prepared. As we think about the P&L, the regular P&L that we've had for over 150, 200 years, they're going to rethink their entire P&L. For example, the budget of real estate, I think, should be reappropriated to digital. So think about the second biggest line item on most companies' P&L is real estate, physical space, after they pay their people. And I'm saying that I think that they should think about that budget being reappropriated to digital experiences, employee engagement, remote collaboration. Office density is going to change. It's never going to be the same again. And so if I'm a CEO or a CFO of a company, I'm thinking, look at my P&L. How do I shift dollars from X to Y and be more prepared next time this happens?
That's a great thought. And I think what you're pushing us to think about is how do we strategically think experience as a core part of everything we do, and how do we take it back to financial planning, into strategic mapping, into priorities and initiatives that we want to launch, and make sure that experience is a core part of that. Ross, it's been a fascinating discussion. I love spending time with you. We could spend a lot more time today if we wanted to, but before we go, are there any other things you want to add to our audience? These are some of the top digital professionals across the globe. They tune in regularly to hear from people like you. Inputs, advice, any learnings that you want to share?
I think there's two things that are needed right now. One is over communication, and two is transparency, hyper transparency. When we think about RightPoint and our people, I know Genpact thinks the same way. I think that the idea that now more than ever, we need to be extremely transparent with what's happening, what's in it for me, how does this affect me, and overly communicative with how this is playing out. Obviously, there's a lot of unknowns, but when we know something, we have to share it and we have to communicate it. So my big advice for other CEOs and other leaders within companies is, again, to over communicate and have radical transparency.
Awesome. That's a fascinating conversation, Ross. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, Ross Freedman, CEO, RightPoint, focus on experience, leading the charge, and deeply involved in many of the topics that I know you and I love to talk about. I want to thank Ross, you again for joining. I want to thank our audience for taking the time to listen, and please continue to participate in the discussion. Ross is on LinkedIn with me, and I'm sure that he'll find the time to respond and get engaged. I'd love to hear more from you, and thank you again for joining. Goodbye.
Thank you, Sanjay. Appreciate it.